In terms of revision of notes, this is kind of a hard thing to cover in one general lecture because myself, I would have done different subjects to all of you watching, so I'll try and keep this as general as possible. Um, just before I go into any subject-specific tips, I for me personally, I did methods and specialist in high school, biology and chemistry, and then English and Japanese. So if you've done a similar subject combination, I did very math science heavy subjects with a couple of languages on the end. Pay attention to my notes, pay attention to my advice. And for those of you who have done completely different subjects to me, I've tried to include some tips that are sort of universal. But as you all know, in terms of revision of notes, this is far more important for content heavy subjects compared to calculation heavy subjects or writing heavy subjects. I know for a fact that for the languages, so English in particular, English and literature, I should say, your external is going to be analytical essay of some type. It's 1,000 words that you need to write. I can't remember what it is exactly for literature. If anyone is in literature, pop it in the chat and let me know. Under 2 hours, and you get an unseen question to one of the novels that you've been studying in class. In terms of notes for exam like that, instead of going through like an English textbook and writing out, I don't know, grammatical rules or something like that, be smart about the way that you're going to revise for this exam because there are still things that you need in your head. For example, quotes that you're going to integrate into your paragraphs, socio-cultural references to the time period that the book you're studying was set in, and aesthetic and stylistic devices. So the way that the authors use certain writing elements to convey a particular theme. I strongly suggest you keep like a OneNote or a Word or Google document that's just a table of all of these things and then what themes it relates to, for example. So you could have one column that is the aesthetic feature. So, for example, I could say, I did Macbeth. So I'm going to say the imagery at the start of the play with all of the supernatural elements, I can include that in the first column. Second column is going to be any quotes or specific details from the book that are related to that element that I'm talking about. In the third column, I talk about its relevance. So that is pathetic fallacy. Pathetic fallacy, if you don't know, this is a quick little impromptu English lesson here, is a technique where an author will use description of the environment or the surroundings, very strong imagery of the surroundings to set the tone or reflect the events that are happening with the characters. So if you've got a novel where the surrounding is described as very, very dark and gloomy and the characters are, plotting murders and doing all sorts of, sinful actions. The two go hand in hand and really, really set the scene for the audience or the reader interacting with the text. So I'll have all of my notes about like the analysis and the feature and everything like that. And then the final column is what themes or what practice essay questions does this relate to? So I could use that in, a question about the unknown. I could use that in a question about, how does the surroundings shape the events of the play? I could use that in a question about symbolism and imagery in general. So all of the themes that are relevant to that particular stylistic device, check them all in that table. And do so for all of the things that you're most comfortable with the book. And then you end up with sort of this cheat sheet. If you get any revision question, you can sift through that and pick out the ones that are best for that essay when you're doing your practice essays or revision for English. Sorry, that was a bit of a spiel about English and literature, but I know that it is a good habit to get into. Memorizing quotes is always important because you are not allowed to bring the text into the exam. As for the more content-heavy subjects, so this is the ones where you've got to memorize a lot of content, so all of your sciences, for example, that one, literally go by the syllabus. And for demonstrative purposes, I'm just going to show you my example of biology. My main subject that I tutor is biology, and if I see you in the bio revision lectures, you'll go through this part again. But on each of your general subject tabs on the QCEE website, you can access the syllabus document and get a hold of the syllabus documents. I don't know if it's yes, it's okay. Get hold of the syllabus points. What I tell all of my students to do, if you haven't started doing this already, write and organize your notes according to the dot points in the syllabus itself, because these are the exact things that your your external exam writers are assessing you on. So this is Unit 4 that I have up right now for biology. Each of these dot points represents the basis of a question that they can ask in the external. So what I strongly suggest that you do is copy all of these into a Word or a Google document or into a notebook alternatively, and write all of the notes for each individual dot point under the dot point, so it kind of becomes like a summary revision document of everything that you need to know for the external. I used to do this for biology and chemistry. If you like, I can show you the bio document that I used before, depending on whether it will think. So here I've got the first topic under Unit 3 and then all of the relevant notes for said topic. Second topic, all of the relevant notes and the formulas. For some of the topics that are more question heavy, I've got exact questions with work solutions in there, and it kind of becomes this like Bible that you just study at the very, very end. So compiling all of your notes into one place makes sure that you've covered everything that you need to know. And I recommend doing this for physics, chemistry, and psychology as well. Then, once you have all of those things compiled, you can go into practice questions knowing that you are not missing any information before starting practice. As for things like languages, I had a summary book of all of the vocab that we had learnt, all of the grammar patterns that were important. For script-based languages, because I did Japanese, I did a summary page of all of the kanji that I knew and that I wanted to learn before the external. And that was kind of like my notes book in that sense. If any of you have any other notes revision strategies, pop them in the chat and so people can interact with them. If there are any subjects that I feel like haven't really mentioned, I know for the histories and humanities, a large part of your external, I think, from memory, focuses on source analysis. So if you maybe want to do a revision notes of things to include or things that you always must do for source analysis, that could be another idea of something you can do. So, yeah. Summary of this slide. Organize your notes in a way that reflects the nature of your subject and the syllabus for your subject. All right, so using the syllabus, this is another example that I've used for chemistry. Each of these dot points within the syllabus should be what you structure your notes around. And a very smart thing to do for chemistry and physics as well is include worked examples under each of them. Same thing for maths. So I've got integration techniques, and this is calculus here. This should be methods. Instead of writing notes and formulas out for maths, what you basically want to do is go through each of these subtopics and try and link it to the matching chapter in your textbook and start with the chapter reviews for all of these different dot points. And then once you've covered the entire textbook and all of the corresponding chapters, then you can start going into exam practice and revision, knowing that you know everything that you need to know. Here's the example that I said with the kanji. So in the syllabus, for your languages, if you don't know this already, they've included tables of all of the sentence patterns and grammar patterns that can come up in the external. So if you use this as a checklist and you're able to identify, like, yes, I know how to use all of these grammar patterns, or yes, I can read and recognize all of these kanji, or for the script-based languages, of course, then it puts you in a very, very comfortable position for externals. So if you can get this done within the next 2 weeks, so if we're talking your externals starting at late October, if you can get all of the notes and like just content revision done by mid-October, it gives you about 2 to 3 weeks of just pure revision and exam practice, which would be pretty, like, timeline wise, very put you in a very comfortable position for externals. Radio. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about review versus practice. So all of those steps that I was talking about before, where you're interacting with the content and interacting with the syllabus, I consider that as exam review or external review, where you're still filling in the gaps for things that you may not know. Another thing to consider is take all of the questions that you got wrong from the mocks and start with the content revision for those first. And if you feel like you got everything wrong, just start from the start and then go until the end. Then once you're comfortable with content revision, start with practice. So I always tell people practice with worked examples first, or like questions that you already have solutions for, because you can look at the work solution that is given to you and see the exact number of steps needed to get the question correct. Instead of just starting with a random chapter review in your textbook and not knowing what to do once you hit the second question. As always, it's very important that you cover a range of questions with an emphasis on the questions that you struggled with the most. So regardless of whether you've got, chapters that you haven't touched in a while, if you know there is a chapter that you very recently revised but you still don't understand, get onto that one and have another crack at it before going on to things that you feel like are easier. Because at the end of the day, easier stuff will always come to you more quickly, whereas ignoring things that you find challenging and again gaslighting yourself into getting them thinking that you can get them correct often is not very successful. Once you're comfortable with that kind of like textbook questions, worksheet questions, those kinds of things, introduce timed practice into them if you really want that competitive edge. I think if you want a general gauge of timings for questions, usually allocate yourself 1 minute per mark that the question is worth. So if it's a 4-mark question, give yourself 4 minutes to answer it. And then once you've answered that, interact with the marking guide, see if you got it correct, and see if you got each individual mark on the marking guide as well. I'm just trying to think. There are some textbooks, if any of you have been doing any maths revision and you work with the Pearson textbook, the Pearson workbook for each of the math subjects gives you time guidelines for each of their questions. So talk to your teachers as to whether they have a copy of the book and then see if you can match, like, you only need to do a couple of their questions before you get an idea of the timings. And once you're familiar with them, then you can just apply them to any of the revision that you're doing. So if you're a person who doesn't feel confident jumping straight into textbooks, a good intermediary step that you can use is like flashcards or a Tomy or any sort of like revision plus question study technique that you have, just to build up to starting exam papers and like exam endurance and that kind of thing. Alrighty, this is personally my favorite study technique. I am a huge fan of Pomodoro. I hope all of you have learnt what Pomodoro is, at least by now. Even in uni, I still use Pomodoro technique. It's it's probably the one that works most effectively to me because there's that like rest and reward principle with the 5-minute break at the end of the study session. So basically, you have to start Pomodoro with an extremely specific goal of what you're going to achieve at the end of a Pomodoro session. Don't just start a study session with, oh, I'm just going to start like methods revision for today, because it's not going to be effective. You're going to sit there scrolling through your chapter, like your textbooks, having a crisis at how much you don't know, and the mindset's just going to spiral from there. So start a study session with a specific goal. For example, chapter 4A, B, and C, and 3 questions from the chapter review. Or if we're doing like English, for example, write a dot point essay for the question of insecurity in Macbeth or something like that, as an example. Once you have picked a task, stick to it and put away all other distractions. So if you're going to do an English study session, put your maths and science and music, history, art, drama textbooks away so that you're only going to be focusing on the subject that is related to your goal. Then we follow the whole Pomodoro timer. So the first session is a 25-minute session of straight productivity, no distractions, purely focusing on achieving that goal that you set at the start of the study session, and work until the 25 minutes is up. Then set yourself a 5-minute break. This in this time you can go and get some snacks, go to the bathroom, have a little breather, and then once the 5 minutes is over, do another set of Pomodoro. And every 4 Pomodoro loops you do, so every 4 lots of 25 minutes, take a longer 15 to 30-minute break so that you're not constantly straining at one subject for an entire while. So 4 lots of 25, that's 100 minutes of a study section, study session. Within 2 hours, you would have gotten, 4 full sessions done and with a break included. And breaking everything up into those smaller sections enables you to stay focused for a longer period of time, which is why Pomodoro works and why it's so much more effective than just blocking away 2.5 hours in your Google Calendar for biology study and then scrolling through your phone for 60% of it. So if you haven't tried Pomodoro already, please do. It is very, very helpful. There are websites that do the whole automatic timings for you, so you don't even need to sit there with a timer manually. You just have to load the website, and then it rings at the end of 25 minutes, rings at the end of 5, and so on and so forth. So it's super, super convenient, especially for students like us, because you can structure it around your timetable pretty flexibly. Now, in terms of procrastination, I am extremely guilty of procrastination. I was back in high school, I still am even in uni, and there are all sorts of things that I have to stop procrastination. One of the apps that I used very almost religiously in high school, I don't use this one as much anymore, but is Forest. So you start Forest with, instead of with Pomodoro, instead of being like a what is it, a strict timing of 25 minutes, Forest lets you pick any sort of duration for a session. So if you wanted to do like a quick 10-minute, Anki card, flashcard review, or a full 1-hour practice exam, you can dial it down in Forest, and it blocks all of the other tabs on your computer from being open. So once I have a Forest timer running, I can't access Instagram, I can't access YouTube, my emails, etc., etc. I can only use the tab that I have open currently, which should be somewhat study related. And then if you manage to successfully be productive in that study session and not open any other subjects or websites or tabs or anything like that, it plants a tree in your forest. And the more successful, productive study sessions you have, the more trees build up in your forest. It's a super wholesome, very cute way of keeping yourself in check. That obviously, and the if you do need to use one of those other websites during the forest timer, it kills the tree. And personally, the guilt of doing that kept me from keeping it going up until the very end. So my forest was looking good at the end of grade 12. It definitely helped. There are a whole other bunch of apps that you can use. I know LifeAt is a pretty good one. I use it for uni sometimes. But LifeAt is this study planner that has lo-fi music inbuilt into it. I'll try and screen share to it to show you guys. It's in the desktop app that you can download. It lets you I'll see if this works. Um, Hopefully you guys can see this. I think it's a white screen at the moment. Maybe it's not loading. It might not be loading because I'm recording something. That might be it. But if in case LifeAt doesn't work, just search up Life and then capital AT. It's a desktop app that you can get that lets you input a study calendar into it. It's got an inbuilt to-do list that you can use, inbuilt like lo-fi music, white noise, um, backgrounds, um, and it's got an inbuilt Pomodoro timer as well. That's what I really like about it too. So I use it whenever I'm doing a study session. I just put all of my to-do tasks on there, so I don't need to check like Google Calendar when I've got a forest session set up. I start the Pomodoro timer and I get about 2.5 hours done, and then take a break. It's super super convenient if you like having everything in one place. Um, with procrastination. All right. Another thing. Oh, whoops. Give me a second. Oh, no, I literally made a slide for it. This is what the Life at room looks like. So it's got all of these buttons down the side. The timer here. Oh, let me try and see if I can get laser pointer. There we go. The timer right here is for a Pomodoro timer. So if you click this icon, a little Pomodoro tab appears on the screen. The calendar allows you to put in all of the sessions. So if you wanted to literally time like from this, like from 2 a.m. to 4, 2 a.m., 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., I'm going to do, biology unit 3 and 4. Then 5 to 6, I'll do maths, etc., etc. You can do so. Media and sounds are for like background music. So media lets you put in, it lets you connect to your Spotify if you've got like a study playlist, or it also has like inbuilt lo-fi into it, which is really convenient for me. The sounds is things like white noise, brown noise, background music. There's like this one toggle thing that lets you play music as if you were sitting in a cafe. So it's completely personal, like customizable to what you like to study to. There's a to-do list in there, which is what I have up here. So if I've got papers that I need to do, or questions that I need to, or content that I need to review, I can just do it and cross it off as needed. Super convenient. You can invite people to a study room. So if you wanted to do a group call, you definitely could. Which brings me to my next thing is study Zoom calls or group study. Now, this can be very, very hit or miss depending on who you choose to study with. So approach this one with caution is all I need to say. If you know that you've got a group of friends who will, get distracted and not be productive with things in a study group, then avoid studying with them. It's as simple as that. But if you have a group of friends who are willing to stay productive, this can be one of the most effective methods of study, hands down. So, what I usually liked to do is I had a group of about 2 to 3 people back in high school that I used to do bio and chem with. Each week, I would say to them, okay, these are the chapters that we're going to do. Or, for example, with biology, I'm hoping that the people watching this have done like some kind of biology because it's the one that I have the most experience tutoring. But for bio, as an example, there's a whole heap of very process heavy topics within the syllabus. So, things like DNA replication, protein synthesis, and like biotechnology. The three of us would learn one of each of these processes, and then we'd meet up and then we'd teach it to each other. So, like, these are all of the steps, this is the process, these are all of the keywords, this is what you need to do to get full marks in the question. The full rundown, each of us would teach each other. And then the next week, we would all swap. So the person who did biotechnology in one week would listen to the biotechnology being explained, and then you can like ask questions and criticize the other's explanation, which you need to do. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It just makes the person explaining think about their answer a little bit more. So it was super, super effective. That study group is still the reason that to this day, I know DNA replication like the back of my hand. So it can be very, very effective. Then another thing that you can do is just go through topics together. So if the three of you like or however many there are, collaborate on a Google Notes doc or something. So, like for chemistry, for example, if each of you split the entire syllabus up and you're like, okay, we'll do these topics, I'll do these topics, um, and collaborate on a shared notes document. What number one, you can get this. Sorry, number one, you can get the syllabus covered much faster, and number two, every time you meet up, you can just go through the topics together because all of you have the exact same notes. You can just go through, ask the questions, review the content, write on a whiteboard, whatever is viable to you. It is so super effective if you're able to pull it off and be productive about it. If you are friends with people who do very different subjects to you, that's okay as well. What you can do is set up a group, FaceTime, Zoom, Discord, or any sort of video study call. Mute the mic, but keep the camera on and hold each other accountable. So the moment that somebody starts being distracted or like scrolls through their phone and isn't working properly, then you have the permission to unmute and call them out for it. But say if you wanted to just sit for a good 2 hours with your central group of friends and do some external preparation, nobody needs to talk. You just need to be there in each other's presence to hold each other accountable. This is also a super, super common thing that I do and is very helpful for me as well. So, hopefully, if any of you choose to do that, I sincerely wish you best of luck in not getting distracted because if it is productive, it's genuinely one of the best ways to study. Whew, alrighty. I hope I haven't bored you to death. If this is exactly how you've been doing it, um, it will pay off though. I do have to say. Alrighty.